In 1954, just a year before his passing, Albert Einstein penned a letter he never expected to see the light of day. Within it, he finally confessed to the question that had tormented him his entire life. The question about God, that he could never quite answer. That very letter fetched almost $3 million at auction, and what it reveals will challenge everything you thought you knew about Albert Einstein, because Einstein wasn't an atheist. But he also didn't believe in the God you were taught about. He believed in something far deeper and far more disturbing, an idea about God that left him trapped between faith and emptiness for the rest of his days. And that idea has a name most people have never heard, but one that completely reshaped my own perspective on existence. Before we continue, I need to give you a warning. What I'm about to reveal isn't just some theory. These are Einstein's own words, letters he wrote, interviews he gave, confessions he made to close friends, all documented, all verifiable, and all far more unsettling than anything you learned in Sunday school. If you're watching this, you've probably felt it yourself. That sensation of gazing up at the sky and realizing there's too much order to be an accident, but too much silence to be a God that cares. This is the question that haunted Einstein. And today, for the first time, I'm going to reveal exactly what that question was and why he could never answer it. Prepare yourself, because this question will change the way you see everything. It'll make you question things you've never questioned before. It'll open doors you might prefer to keep shut, but if you're here, it's because you're ready. It all began when Albert Einstein was just 12 years old. He grew up in a secular Jewish family, but his parents weren't religious. There were no prayers in the house, no rituals, no talk of God, at least not in the traditional sense. Einstein's parents were secular Jews, practical people, focused on the material world, on work, on business, on survival. Religion, for them, was just a cultural tradition, a formality, nothing more. But something strange happened. Alone, without anyone teaching him, Einstein developed what he described as a profound religious feeling. In his own words, he wrote that despite being the son of entirely irreligious parents, he came to a deep religiosity. He started reading the Bible, studied sacred texts, and for a brief period believed everything. A personal God, prayers, miracles, reward and punishment. Young Albert Einstein prayed, sang religious hymns on the way to school, felt the presence of something greater, believed his prayers were heard, and answered with the innocence of a child who hasn't yet been wounded by the world. But then he discovered science, and everything changed in a way he would never forget, changed in a way that would define the rest of his life. But I need to pause here, because what I'm about to reveal is something that most Einstein biographers completely overlook. At 12 years old, Einstein read physics and mathematics books that changed his worldview. These weren't ordinary school books. They were advanced books on Euclidean geometry, texts on differential calculus, works on the structure of the universe. And these books did something no religious sermon ever could. They showed Einstein that the universe was comprehensible, that there were rules, that there were patterns, that there was order. He realized that the stories in the Bible couldn't be literally true, and that realization devastated him. Einstein described this moment as a trauma, a wound that never fully healed. He wrote that the impression that youth is being deliberately deceived by the state through lies left him in shock, a shock that resulted in a distrust of all authority, of all dogma, of all truth. That couldn't be verified by reason, but not in the way you think. He didn't become an atheist. he became something much more complex, something he would struggle to define for the rest of his life, because Einstein realized something most people never do. Rejecting the God of the Bible doesn't mean rejecting God. It means that maybe the real God is something very different from what we've been taught. And that's when the question began to form. The question that would never leave him in peace. Einstein looked at the universe and saw something that profoundly impressed him. Order, not chaos, not accident, but perfect mathematical laws governing everything. The same equation that describes the Earth's orbit around the Sun describes the orbit of an electron around an atom. The same force that makes an apple fall is the one that holds galaxies together. The speed of light is constant, always the same, anywhere in the universe. For any observer, the fundamental constants are calibrated with a precision that defies comprehension. If the strong nuclear force was slightly weaker, atoms wouldn't exist. If gravity was slightly stronger, stars would explode before forming planets. If the mass of the electron were slightly different, the chemistry that allows life would be impossible. Everything seemed tuned, calibrated, designed. Einstein saw in this something he could only describe as divine. He wrote that he felt boundless admiration for the structure of the world, as far as our science can reveal it. But here was the problem. This God that he saw in the laws of physics was completely different from the God people prayed to. The God of prayers is a personal God, a God who listens, who responds, who intervenes, who cares about what you do, who rewards the good and punishes the evil. But the God Einstein saw was different. It was an impersonal God, a God who created perfect laws and let the universe follow those laws, a God who doesn't break his own rules to answer prayers, a God who reveals his greatness in the harmony of the cosmos, not in individual miracles. And that difference is crucial. The personal God is a God of relationship. You speak, he listens. You ask, he decides. There's a conversation, an interaction, a response. But Einstein's God was different. It was like the architect of a perfect building who left the building and never came back. You can admire the structure, you can study the plans, you can marvel at the engineering, but the architect isn't there to answer your questions. And here was born the question that would haunt Albert Einstein. If God created this universe so perfectly ordered, so mathematically elegant, so clearly intentional, why doesn't he answer? Why is the universe so eloquent in its beauty, but so silent in our pain? Why wouldn't a God capable of creating such perfection intervene when a child dies of cancer, when an innocent person suffers, when evil triumphs? This was the question, and Einstein never found the answer. In 1929, a rabbi from New York sent Einstein a telegram asking directly if he believed in God. Einstein's response became one of the most famous statements about religion ever made. He replied that he believed in the God of Spinoza, who reveals himself in the harmony of all that exists, not in a God who concerns himself with the fate and actions of mankind. Spinoza was a 17th century philosopher who was excommunicated from the Jewish community for his radical ideas. He proposed that God and nature are the same thing. Deus sive natura, God or nature. This phrase, in Latin, sums up Spinoza's entire philosophy and Einstein's entire confusion. For Spinoza, there is no separation between creators and creation. There is no God sitting on a throne above the clouds, looking down on us. There is no separate being who decided to create the universe and then just sat back, watching from the sidelines. No, for Spinoza, God is reality itself, not a separate being who created the universe, but the universe itself in its entire totality. For Spinoza, there is no God out there looking at us. God is reality itself. The laws of physics are the thoughts of God. The mathematics of the universe is the mind of God. We are part of God, just as a wave is part of the ocean. Einstein adored this idea. It solved part of his problem. It allowed him to maintain a sense of reverence without accepting superstitions. It allowed him to see divinity without praying to it. It allowed him to feel connected to something larger without expecting answers. He declared that he was fascinated by Spinoza's pantheism and that Spinoza was the greatest of modern philosophers because he was the first to treat the soul and the body as one thing, not as two separate things. Spinoza gave Einstein a language to express what he felt, a philosophical framework for his intuition, a name for the God he saw in the equations. But even Spinoza didn't solve the problem, because if God is the laws of nature, then God is impersonal. By definition, the laws of physics don't care if you're good or evil. Gravity pulls you down, whether you're a saint or a murderer. Light travels at the same speed for everyone. The equations make no exceptions, and if God is those equations, then God makes no exceptions. God doesn't answer prayers. God doesn't intervene. God simply is, exists, functions, operates, but doesn't listen, doesn't answer, doesn't care about you any more than he cares about a rock or a star. To the God of Spinoza, you're not special. You're just another manifestation of infinite reality, as important as a blade of grass, as insignificant as a grain of cosmic dust. And here was Einstein's torture. He saw too much order to accept that there was no God, but too much silence to accept a God who cares. He was trapped between two worlds, seeing evidence of intelligence in the design of the universe, but no evidence that that intelligence cares about use. In 1936, a 6-year-old girl named Lily Wright wrote a letter to Einstein. Her question was simple and devastating. She wanted to know if scientists pray. Einstein responded personally, and his answer reveals the depth of his internal struggle. Remember, this was a child, a 6-year-old girl, asking an innocent question, and Einstein decided to respond personally, with care, with honesty, with the same seriousness that he would use to respond to a fellow scientist. Why? Because her question was the same question that haunted him. He explained that a scientist believes that the events of nature are controlled by laws, and these laws cannot be violated by prayers or requests to supernatural beings. Einstein told her that it doesn't make sense to ask those laws to change. You can't ask the laws of physics to cure your sick father. You can't ask gravity to be kinder. You can't ask entropy to spare the ones you love. But then Einstein added something fascinating. He said that everyone who is seriously involved in the pursuit of science becomes convinced that a spirit is manifest in the laws of the universe, a spirit vastly superior to that of man, a spirit, not just blind laws, but a spirit. That is what Einstein saw. Intelligence behind the equations, purpose behind the order, mind behind the matter, but a mind that doesn't answer when you call, a mind that created and left, a mind that is present in everything but absent from all conversation, a mind that you can study but never know. That's much more disturbing than atheism, because atheism gives you freedom. If there is no God, you are free. You can create your own meaning. You can live without cosmic expectations. But if there is a God who is in everything but doesn't answer, that's loneliness on a universal scale. That's cosmic abandonment. And that tormented him, because Einstein couldn't accept the coldness of atheism. To him, the idea that all of this arose by chance was so improbable that it bordered on the absurd. He said that chance was God's pseudonym when he didn't want to sign his name. Einstein saw intentionality in everything, in the perfectly calibrated gravitational constant, in the fundamental forces exactly balanced to allow for the existence of stars, planets, and life, in the mathematical elegance of the equations that describe reality. All of this screamed design. All of this suggested mind. All of this pointed to something beyond chance. But that something didn't answer. That something didn't interfere. That something remained silent while the world burned. In 1954, less than a year before he died, Einstein received a book from a philosopher named Ethan Gutkind. The book was about Jewish spirituality and the relationship between science and faith. Einstein read the book and decided to respond. The letter he wrote became known as the God letter, and it is devastating. In it, Einstein finally gave up on using soft words, gave up on diplomacy, gave up on trying to please religious people and atheists at the same time. He wrote with the brutal honesty of a man who knew that death was near and that he no longer had time for half-truths. He wrote that the word God was nothing more than the expression and the product of human weaknesses, and the Bible, a collection of venerable but still primitive legends. This statement shocked many people. It seemed like the confession of an atheist, the final admission that Einstein had abandoned all religion. It sounded like the declaration of an atheist, but it wasn't, because in the same letter, Einstein demonstrated that he was still struggling with the question. He couldn't accept the God of the Bible, but he also couldn't accept a universe without any transcendent meaning. He was trapped, and he would remain trapped until the end. The question that haunted Einstein can be framed in various ways, but at its core, it was simple. If there is an intelligence behind the universe, a mind that created this perfect order, why doesn't that mind communicate with us? Why does the universe speak in mathematics but remain mute to our pains? Why does the Creator reveal himself in laws but hide from suffering? Einstein saw two facts that seemed contradictory. First, the universe appears designed, not by chance, but by intelligence. Second, that intelligence doesn't seem to care. How to reconcile these two things? How to accept a God who creates perfection but permits suffering? How to venerate an intelligence that projects beauty but ignores pain? How to maintain reverence for something that doesn't respond? These questions had no easy answers, and Einstein was too honest to pretend he did. Einstein tried throughout his life and failed. Or maybe he didn't fail. Maybe he did something more important. Maybe he lived honestly with the uncertainty. He called his belief a cosmic religious feeling, a feeling that he described as very difficult to explain to anyone who doesn't have it, and a feeling in which the individual perceives the futility of human desires and objectives, and the sublimity and marvelous order that are revealed both in nature and in the world of thought. Individual existence seems to him a kind of prison, and he wants to experience the universe as a meaningful whole. That's what Einstein felt, that his individual existence was a prison, that he was part of something much larger, that the universe was a meaningful whole. But he couldn't make the leap to believe that this whole cared about him or about any of us. He could feel the connection, but not the answer. He could see the intelligence, but not the compassion. He could perceive the design, but not the designer responding, and this tension accompanied him to his deathbed. Einstein died on April 18, 1955. His last words were in German, and the nurse who was with him didn't speak German. Caroline Rogers was her name. She was there when Einstein murmured his last words, words in German that she didn't understand, words that were lost forever. Some speculate that they were words of farewell. Others think they were final reflections on his life, or maybe they were the same question that had accompanied him since he was 12 years old, the question about God that he never managed to answer. So we will never know exactly what he said, but we know what he wrote weeks before to the family of his best friend, Michael Burke, who had just died. Einstein wrote that Burke had departed from this strange world a little before him, but that it didn't mean anything, because for us, convinced physicists, the distinction between past, present, and future is only a persistent illusion. Einstein did not believe in death as an end. He saw time as an illusion. For him, Burke hadn't gone away. Burke always existed, and will always exist at some point in space-time, just like Einstein, just like you, just like all of us. This view of time was deeply comforting to Einstein. It meant that death was not the end, just a change of perspective, like turning the page of a book that has already been written. The story continues to exist. You're just not reading that page anymore. But even that didn't answer the question, because existing eternally in a block of space-time isn't the same as existing eternally with a God who knows you. Existing eternally in a silent universe is different from existing eternally with a God who answers. The question remains. If you're watching this, probably the question haunts you too. You look at the world and see too much order to be chance, but too much silence to be a personal God. You feel that there is something beyond, but you can't hear it. You perceive the intelligence in the design, but not the voice answering your prayers. That doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you're asking the same question that the greatest genius in history asked and never answered, and that should comfort you. Because if Einstein, with all his intelligence, couldn't solve this, then it's not your fault for not having figured it out either. It's not a lack of faith. It's not a lack of intelligence. It's simply a question that maybe has no answer. At least not an answer that our finite brains can comprehend. Maybe the question is not meant to be answered. Maybe the question is the path itself. Einstein said that the mystery is the most beautiful thing we can experience. It is the source of all true art and science. He to whom this emotion is a stranger, who can no longer pause to wonder and stand wrapped in awe, is as good as dead. Maybe living with the question is more important than finding the answer. Maybe the tension between seeing order and not hearing a response is exactly where we are destined to be. Not in the comfort of certainties, but in the humility of mystery. Einstein lived in that space, in that uncomfortable place between certainties, in that uncharted territory where most people are afraid to stay, between faith and doubt, between order and silence, between the design and the absent designer, between seeing intelligence and not hearing a response. Between admiring the creation and questioning the creator. He didn't flee from that space, didn't seek easy answers to escape the discomfort, didn't choose atheism to get rid of the question, didn't choose religion to get rid of the doubt. He simply stayed there, living honestly with what he didn't know. And from there, he discovered relativity, revolutionized physics, changed our understanding of the universe. Maybe the unanswered question is not a failure. Maybe it's a door to a deeper understanding, a doorway to a greater humility, a doorway to accepting that we are simply too small to hold all the answers, but sufficiently curious to keep asking. Einstein wasn't a man of blind faith, but neither was he a man without faith. He had faith in the order of the universe, faith in the comprehensibility of nature, faith in human reason, and perhaps that is enough. If this video has made you think differently about Einstein and about God, please consider supporting this channel with super thanks. Each contribution allows me to continue revealing what they preferred would remain hidden. You are not just a spectator, you are a seeker, someone who wants to understand, someone who does not accept easy answers, someone who, like Einstein himself, looks at the universe and asks. And seekers support the truth. Because the truth does not reveal itself on its own, it needs people willing to look for it. The question that haunted Einstein is still alive, still unanswered, and now it's yours as well. What do you see when you look at the universe? Order or chaos? Design or chance? Silence or just a voice that we haven't yet learned to hear? This question is more important than any answer I could give you, because the answer is yours. No one can decide this for you, not Einstein, not Spinoza, not even me. You need to look at the universe with your own eyes and decide what you see. Comment below. Do you believe that Einstein was right about Spinoza's God? Or do you think there is a personal God that he simply failed to find? I will respond to every comment in the first 2 hours. The question continues. It continues in you. It continues in all who look at the night sky and wonder. It continues in all who feel that there is something more, but can't quite define what it is. Einstein carried this question for 76 years, and now it's yours. What are you going to do with it? And perhaps the answer is closer than we imagine. Perhaps it's within us, in some place that we haven't yet looked, waiting to be discovered.